Meet your simulators. Memorandum 6. A communication about the nature and purpose of the simulation. The simulators never hid themselves. They built themselves right into the human story. They were there from the beginning. They want humanity to know who they are. The signs and portents of them are everywhere, but people just aren't paying attention. We shall now provide the Q&A you requested. We have included all of the questions you posed and answered them all. Of course, answers are only as good as your ability to comprehend them. Answers are not a democracy. They're not for everyone. They're only for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. They're only for the wise. The unwise can find no answers in answers, just more confusion. They cannot accept answers. They reject answers. We can do nothing for them, only for the seekers of truth. As Robert Heinlein said, democracy can't work. Mathematicians, peasants, and animals, that's all there is. So democracy, a theory based on the assumption that mathematicians and peasants are equal, can never work. To work, is this a simulation? Yes. Q, I don't understand what that means. Can you explain what this simulation is? A, here's the simplest way to explain the simulation. It's a world you live in that is not base reality. You believe it is, but it isn't. There's a deeper reality, unsimulated, from where the simulation you inhabit is projected. The world you inhabit, no matter how seemingly real, is actually a sophisticated illusion, a mirage. It's not the real deal, the thing in itself. It was made for you by others who do not live in this simulated reality with you. They're outside it. Though they can enter it via avatars, there is a true reality and it's possible to live there. But if you're living in a simulation, you're not in true reality. The reality you are in has been constructed by others, and you will never know unless you reach base reality, how closely this simulation approximates base. It might be nothing like base, just as a fantasy novel has very little connection to the real world, although it may be a very convincing fantasy that you find utterly believable. Q, who are the simulators? A, to explain that, we need to explain base reality to you. This will be the ride of your life. It will change your understanding of everything. It will change you irrevocably. So here we go. Hold on to your hats. Weapons hot. Base reality. God sleeps in the rock, dreams in the plant, stirs in the animal, and awakens in man. Ibn Arabi. The divine spirit slumbers in the stone, dreams in the animal, and is awake in man. Schelling. Base reality is all about the one. The philosopher Hegel said, the truth is the whole is the one. What is the one? Well, that's what philosophy has always tried to answer. Religion too, and spirituality. Science struggles with this question because it sees it as metaphysical, hence outside the physicalist paradigm of science. What kind of thing could the one be? It's either mental or non-mental. There's no other option. Traditionally, the one is God, a perfect mind that creates everything else. Who is God? God is the most extraordinary being. To imagine how amazing God is, imagine God before creation, God entirely on his own, God in himself. Imagine God before he has done anything. What is he in his most primitive state? He is pure potentiality, pure latency, pure dormancy, pure formlessness. He is a night without end, an impenetrable darkness. He is everywhere and nowhere. Time and space do not exist. What does God do in this state? He does nothing. In fact, in many ways, he strongly resembles nothing. How shall we characterize his state? He is in the state of sleep. He's unconscious. This is an astonishing God because he is pure being, yet appears to be pure nothing. The sleeping God seems like non-existence rather than existence. That's part of his charm, his mystery. Atheists always believe he's not there at all. They can't tell the difference between God in himself, God asleep, God as pure unconsciousness, and nothing at all, godless nothingness. Many atheists believe that base reality is nothing at all in which some random fluctuation, some extraordinary quantum tunneling event, occurs for no reason and existence suddenly exists. Of quantum tunneling, Katrina Kramer wrote, "Imagine releasing a quantum mechanical particle, like an electron or proton, into a space on one side of a potential energy hill. Since you're sure that the particle can't escape, it's not energetic enough to climb over the hill, you leave it to its own devices. But when you go back to check on it, the particle is gone. You find it happily sitting on the other side of the hill, having sneaked straight through it." Tunneling particles can simply pass through energy barriers. They don't have the energy to surmount. Atheists believe that existence somehow tunnels through non-existence, and completely unexpectedly pops up on the other side as existence. The only alternative is God, and they would accept anything other than God. The ancient Greeks knew who the true God was, Hypnos, the god of sleep. In some stories, they said that Hypnos was the fatherless son of Nyx, night. Night birthed him. In other stories, they said that he did have a father, Erebos, darkness. In fact, Nyx and Erebos were not the parents of Hypnos. Rather, they were aspects of him. The god of sleep, as pure unconsciousness, is pure darkness, pure night, and as close to pure nothingness as it gets. God is the deep emptiness, the profound absence, the cosmic expectation. What will the god of sleep do, and how will he do it? He is prime mind. Mind is pure potential which has not yet done anything. Psychologist Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The unconscious sleeping god is fated to do something astounding. What can a sleeping mind do? It can do one thing only. It can dream. Hypnos, the god of sleep, darkness, and the deep unconscious, the formless god of pure potential, finds something irresistibly welling up in his mind, a dream. This is the foundational dream, the first emanation of the profound unconscious. It is the dream of form, and it comes in the form of the dream of another being, a being defined by form. We might call this other being the Son of God. It is none other than Morpheus, son of sleep and god of dreams, god of forms. The Greek philosopher Plato spoke of true reality as an immaterial domain of perfect forms, ideas. A being called the demiurge could access this domain and thus be in a position to implement the forms, ideas. The Alexandrian philosopher Philo simply made the forms, ideas, the direct thoughts of the demiurge, his intellect. The Neoplatonists referred to the first emanation of the One as the Nous. God, the One Hypnos, emanated his own intellect, his form-making capacity, his conceptual apparatus, his language facility. The Greek philosopher Aristotle regarded God as pure actualization, as pure form. That in fact is Morpheus, god of form. He is actualized from the potential of sleep, from the One, from Hypnos. Already when Morpheus appears, we are one step removed from base reality, the formless, sleeping, unconscious one. We are at the level of the first emanation, the first simulation. Hypnos, god of sleep, has dreamt into existence dreaming itself, and dreaming itself is another being, a projection of the mind of Hypnos. It's Morpheus, god of dreaming via his form-making capacity. Every dream is in an exercise in formation, forming the dream. So we now have two levels of existence, formless sleep, potential, and formed dreaming, actualization. With the formless and form, potential and actualization, everything else can be done. The German philosopher Hegel said that being, thesis, base form before anything is actually formed, and nothing, antithesis, base formlessness, the negation of form, had as their dialectical synthesis becoming, the driver of all change, all determination. Colin MacLear wrote, "One might think that philosophy ought to begin with the concept of beginning itself. Yet for Hegel, such a concept is, paradoxically, too complex to serve as the real beginning of thought. The concept of beginning, Anfang, is that of a nothing from which something is to proceed. It thus takes for granted from the start that what is being thought is the beginning of something yet to emerge. At the start of philosophy, however, we cannot assume that there will be anything beyond what we start with. We cannot assume, therefore, that what we start with is in fact the beginning of anything further. All we may understand there to be is sheer indeterminate being, which may or may not prove later to be or to have been the beginning of something more. Hegel's account of being begins not with a full sentence, but with a sentence fragment. Being, pure being, without any further determination. In this way, Hegel indicates through his language that what we are to focus on is not a determinate subject of discourse or thing, nor a predicate of some assumed thing, such as the absolute, but rather utterly indeterminate being. Such being is to be thought of not as existence or nature, but as sheer being as such, what Hegel calls indeterminate immediacy. Being and nothing thus both prove to be absolutely necessary and to be endlessly generated by one another. Yet neither has a separate stable identity apart from its vanishing, since logically, each vanishes straight away into the other. This vanishing that each one is its own utter indeterminacy, indeterminacy now understood not just as sheer being or nothing, but as radical instability and fluidity. The name Hegel gives to this immediate vanishing of the one in the other is becoming Werden. Pure indeterminate being is not just being or nothing, therefore, but becoming. Nothing in turn cannot just be sheer and utter nothing, but must also be its own vanishing or becoming. Presuppositionless philosophy has to begin with sheer being, but it evidently cannot stop there, because sheer being immediately proves to be not just being, but becoming. This is not to say that it is now wrong to talk of being. Being is, it is one, or rather proves to be, absolutely irreducible. What Hegel's philosophy shows, however, is that logically, purely by virtue of being turns out to be becoming. Becoming is thus what being is in truth. Immediacy as the restless vanishing and re-emergence of itself. The first thing to note is that Hegel's account of pure being is both conceptual and ontological. It shows that the bare thought of being mutates into the thought of becoming, and that being itself turns out to be becoming. The fact that the logic advances an ontological thesis does not mean, however, that it describes a temporal or historical process. As finite beings, we must unfold in time all that being entails, and so must think first of being, then of nothing, and then of becoming. In so doing, however, we are not claiming that pure being itself vanishes and develops into becoming over time. We are claiming that pure being proves to be logically or structurally unstable, that it turns out logically to be nothing but vanishing and becoming. It's all about sleep, being and nothing, potential, and dreaming becoming actualization. It's all about Hypnos and Morpheus. So, although Hypnos is base reality, it's an unproductive base. Only when Morpheus is emanated is reality then productive, generative, constructive. In this sense, base reality is Hypnos and Morpheus together, God and the Son of God, God in himself and God as his intellect, nous, able to do things. What does Morpheus, the active agent of base reality, do? He emanates the dream world, and he does so via a very particular emanation, another being called phantasos, apparition, fantasy from ancient Greek, phantasia, appearance, imagination. Phantasos is the true demiurge, the maker of the world. He emanates the world. In Neoplatonism, he is equivalent to Psyche,